Stop hoping for your business to grow and start mastering the formula for success that every entrepreneur needs to grow their business. Join us for 5+1 Mastery, where every week we go in depth on how to grow your business the right way. Learn more at 5+1mastery.com.
I've hopped from sports to gym owners to cases in Pennsylvania. My whole point of bringing this to your attention is to start to pay attention to what's happening.
I'm your host, Chaz Wilson. I bring you successful entrepreneurs, add valuable wisdom to your journey, and help you succeed. Welcome to Connect, Share, and Prosper.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Connect, Share, Prosper. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson. I'm excited to be with you today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me every week on these episodes of Connect, Share, Prosper. Got an interesting topic I want to pose your direction today and get your thoughts and input. So I hope you'll make a comment. I hope you'll interact with us here today during this discussion. A couple weeks ago, I brought to you a story about Ian and Frank with Atilis Gym in New Jersey and how they had been shut down and they continued to reopen. So if you haven't watched that episode, I would encourage you to go back and watch that, because we're going to kind of continue the story, but I want to share with you a couple things that are happening around the country. I think you're noticing this and you're starting to see things happen. And so I want to know your input and where you're at. It's interesting right now for the entrepreneur because in so many states, it's so different, right? We're here in Texas, located here in Texas, and we can see certain things happening. And you can almost see these political lines drawn in the sand across different states and how they're dealing with the pandemic and when it relates to business. I said a couple weeks ago on an episode, and I said to our team, the interesting thing's going to happen is when, and this happens in anything, you guys, when a pendulum swings really hard one way, it's going to come back with that much force and come back the other way. And I think we're starting to see that. I'm going to post some evidence of that, of my opinion, that supports where I'm at on this. I'm going to share that with you today on this episode of Connect, Share, Prosper. All right, so today, as we go through this, I just firmly believe that the pendulum's starting to swing back the other way, meaning so many things have been locked down, shut down, and it's starting to affect, big time, it's starting to affect business. There's a mental health aspect, which I'm not going to touch on today. That'll be for a future episode. But guys, I think the ramifications of what we're doing, we haven't even seen yet. Right now, we've been propped up, okay? Consumer spending in July was up not consumer spending. Consumer borrowing was up 3.6% in July. That means people are living, it's up 3.6%. They're living on borrowed funds. And you've got it propped up with things like PPP, and the EDIL loans, etc. Guys, this is going to come back hard on the economy, and right now we're not talking about that. Let me share with you what I think is happening and where this is going, and I'm going to share with you several thoughts. Here in Texas, the local school district I'm in went back to school. They gave us the option. We could do remote learning or we could do in person. And my children, we sat down with them. We had a discussion. We said, look, if you're going to do in-person learning, here are the rules you're going to have to follow, right? Here are the things the school district has put in place that you're going to have to follow. And we looked at the statistics and the numbers. And I want you to remember something. See, here in Texas and across most states, there was mandates and orders put in place, right? In Texas, it was March 13th. And initially, even before that, it was, we need 15 days to flatten the curve. Remember, flatten the curve. What was the number they were tracking? It was the death rate. And then it turned into mandates. March 13th was the mandate. We are now just past 6 months in Texas of this mandate being in place. 6 months. 15 days, flatten the curve. Now we're at 6 months. And just on September 7th, Governor Abbott here in Texas extended the mandate with no date of expiration on it. I want you to think about this, you guys. And I know I'm already going to get that back of like the rights versus health and safety. I'm going to share with you some evidence today. I want you to look at this and think about this. In our county, they post the numbers every single day. How many new cases, how many active cases, how many deaths, etc. Right? And here's what's interesting. Local officials I want to say it was about 60 days, 90 days ago, what was reported locally, the state came in and said, no, you have to turn that over. We're going to track it at the state level. No longer will the counties report in. It will be all tracked and traced through the state. And some of our local judges and commissioners here fought back on that. They didn't win, but they were fighting hard on that. And a couple weeks ago here in the county I'm in, I was going to see if I could pull up these stats. I'll show you these numbers here. In one day, it showed that we had 4,000, roughly 4,600 active cases of COVID-19 in my county. Okay, and there's about 1.8 million, 1.6 million, I think, in this county. And it said 4,600 active cases. And our commissioners and our judges here locally came out and said, no, we don't believe those numbers. We have factual evidence to support that this is not correct. We 100% reject these numbers from the state. We have the evidence. We're sending it to the state, etc. 3 days later, the active cases were at 84. We went from 4,600 active cases to like 84, 89, something like that. It's really hard to make decisions. Can you imagine? Schools, businesses, sports, churches. How do you make decisions when your numbers are off by 4,500 active cases? Right? It's difficult for those decisions. And so I think there becomes the argument that people make is, well, the one side of the argument is look at the stats, look at the numbers. This supports the science. But the other side of the argument then says, well, I can't even trust those numbers that you're saying is factual and that we're basing this on. And I think what you're starting to see, in my opinion, and I'll show you a couple things here, is the evidence of this pendulum starting to swing back. Even in some of the places that have been the most tightly shut down, or industries that have been the most tightly shut down, you're starting to see that. So let's revisit just for a second. If you didn't watch my past podcast on Ian Smith and Frank over in New Jersey, who they have been told they were non-essential as a gym. And recently, they kept opening. They've been arrested. They've been fined. And Ian recently, I'm going to show you a video here. He went on the Capitol of Pennsylvania, and he put on a rally. And this is what he had to say here at their rally in Pennsylvania.
And to date, we have over 37,000 visits to the facility, and not a single case of COVID-19 has been reported by one person who is stuck in the gym. And nobody's wearing a mask. When people step inside the facility, it's the old normal. It's a place where people come. We're a gym, a community-based gym, full of veterans, active military, first responders, doctors, lawyers, middle-class America, all of the people who are being oppressed. Black, white, doesn't matter. Young, old. Our oldest member is an 88-year-old woman who comes in at 5 o'clock every
88-year-old woman, and she's not wearing a mask. He said 37,000 people have come through their gym at Atilis Gym in New Jersey, and not one reported case of COVID-19 has come through their gym. And you can see on here, he says, we reject mask mandates. Again, this is Ian's post. He says, we reject mask mandates. We reject government lockdowns, and we reject the false numbers. And I think that's where some of this pendulum is starting to swing, is the evidence that's there. Now, remember, the narrative at the beginning was we're tracking active cases, the infection rate. Now the death toll. Now it's the infection rate and the active cases, right? So many people have it. So many people have it. I remember at the very beginning listening on the way home to the radio, a Sirius XM radio on one of the news stations. And, they come on. I remember it was Wolf Blitzer came on, and he's like, they play this music. Boom, boom, boom. Death toll update of COVID-19, like, election results or whatever. It was madness. And everything was about, you got COVID, it was a death sentence. Now, I don't want to come off as insensitive. There are people, and I know people who've lost loved ones to COVID-19. That is a fact. There is also evidence that supports that it is not a death sentence and you get it in every case. And more studies coming out every single day. So I think where people get stuck people like you and me, is we see one thing you can find that it's basically you get COVID, it's a death sentence, to another report that will say, no, eat right, sleep healthy, etc., you're going to be okay. And so people get stuck on, what do I believe? But I think the fear that was initially placed in with all of these mandates, people are going, no. People like Ian say, no, we reject this because we're an essential business. We've put in safety protocols. And so I wonder where you're at on this. Where are you at? What's it like in your state? How's it affecting business? Because you're starting to see things change. And now, in fact, let me go to some of these places. Pennsylvania has been shut down with a lot of restriction. I'm going to play for you a video. The governor, Tom Wolf, in Pennsylvania, had put on a lot of restrictions still in place for many of the businesses. And then here's a recent update of just a couple days ago. I want you to watch this.
Federal judge in Western Pennsylvania has ruled that some of Governor Wolf's COVID-19 restrictions are unconstitutional, specifically a cap on the size of gatherings, the closing of non-essential businesses, and Wolf's stay-at-home order, the last two of which are no longer in effect. Action News reporter Christy Aletto was live in Center City, Philadelphia, getting reaction to the ruling by the judge. Christy, the governor's office, what reaction did they have?
Well, Jim, the Governor Wolf's office says that it is disappointed with the ruling. Meanwhile, most businesses have reopened, including restaurants here, and they're hoping that this week's Restaurant Week will be an added boost to their bottom line.
We've been very, very busy nonstop since its opening.
Center City Restaurant Week kicking off with fewer participants this year as city businesses work to rebound from the pandemic with increased health and safety protocols.
Given everything that happened, it's been important for Restaurant Week to get a sense of normalcy.
The annual event happening against the backdrop of Monday's federal court ruling that called Governor Wolf's orders in March initiated by the pandemic unconstitutional. Specifically, the restriction of large gatherings, the shuttering of non-life sustaining businesses, and a stay-at-home order. The suit was filed during the state's red phase when most businesses were closed.
I think that they made the right call.
So here's my question, and here's the thing to think about. And this is where I think we pose the most important question. A federal judge saying these rulings, these mandates, these orders were unconstitutional. And I think then the argument will be, well, but when health and safety become primary, do those constitutional rights then become no longer valid? That's the question. Are constitutional rights only valid when times are good? Or when times are tough, are constitutional rights put aside? Right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where do those constitutional rights stop? Is it only in good times? Or can they only be enforced in good times or in bad times? And I think that was the question that were in place. Now, of course, what we've read through is that the governor is, he's stating he's disappointed in this ruling, of course, because it's challenging his rulings. But you're now starting to see the pendulum swing back. Judges, lawsuits, things going, no, wait a second, this is unconstitutional. Wait a second, there's lawsuits were already coming across challenging numbers in states, death certificate, death notices of people who died 9 months ago, and now they're getting things in the mail that they tested positive for COVID-19. Right? So these lawsuits are starting to happen, and some of this is starting to unravel, and you're even seeing it in certain places where they're opening things up. Okay, in fact, in the Midwest, as it comes to sports and so forth, I'm going to share with you some even more updates. Here in Texas, where I'm at, as we were talking about with my kids in school, and I know I'm kind of jumping around, but I've got a lot to cover here. They said, look, do you want to go back to school? Do you not want to go back to school? And we laid out the rules with them and shared it, and we went back to school. 14,000 staff and students in the school district, and there's 4 active cases. We've been back for about 4.5 weeks in person. There are 4 active cases confirmed. The school district is showing you can do it safely, you can be in person, and the reality is I've been talking to my kids about it, they love being in person. They love seeing their friends. They love being able to play on a playground. They love being able to connect with their teachers in person. The human connection. And I think this proves, this is proof, factual proof, 4.5 weeks, in-person school, 14,000 staff and students, 4 active cases. Okay? Let me put it to you another way. So the sports league here says, hey, we're going to go ahead with a football season. So my younger kids get to play football, right? And all of these rules come out. They started coming out, and I challenged some of it. As you can imagine, those that know me, I challenged some of it and got some pushback. But eventually, some of those rules changed. And here are some of the rules, right? We had to take a temperature. They gave us a scanner. We could take temperature. Every parent had to sign a COVID waiver for their child. Get this, every game, I have to sign as a coach an affidavit that none of my players are sick, okay, or that they've reported anything. The next is all the coaches and referees have to wear masks on the sidelines. All of the players were told they had to wear a mask on the sideline when they were not in the game. And I have to tell you, I that was the one I challenged, and I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't make sense, okay? We lost our stinking minds. Okay, so how does it make sense that the kids can breathe and tackle each other and be all over each other in a game, in a physical contact game, not wearing a mask, but then they get on the sidelines spaced out 6 feet apart and they have to wear a mask? And not only that, the governor's order did not require that. Okay, so I was challenging back on that. Then they came back and said, you're right. The kids don't have to wear the mask on the sideline. Not to mention the fact in Texas, on a football field, a turf field in the summer here, it could get up to 110, 115 degrees. Kids are sprinting all over the field, and then they got to come off, and immediately I've got a police putting a mask on them. So these were all the regulations to play football. Now, we were like, great, let's play football. Okay, we are now in week 3 of games. We've been practicing for weeks. And I want to tell you what's been interesting. So we get this email that says from the league, every ref will be wearing a mask. Every coach is required to wear a mask. Everybody has to sign the affidavit, etc. So I come, I've got a bag. I've got all the paperwork. I've got affidavits signed, COVID waivers, masks, the gaiters that you can pull over just in case a kid doesn't have. I've got all of it, right? And we're like the 4th game of the day. I show up. Here's the deal. Not a single referee wearing a mask. Not a single coach. Not a single player from the game before are out there wearing. I look in the stands. I think on both sides I saw maybe 3 people, and we're talking hundreds of people, maybe 3 people wearing a mask. And that has been every single week. Nobody's there to enforce it. Nobody's there to talk about it. But what it shows me is that people are so afraid. It's policy, right? They've got to check the box to cover their rear end to say, well, we told them all they had to do it. So if anyone got COVID-19, the reality is people aren't being sued. Leagues aren't being sued because somebody contracted. They're not even able to prove that anyway. Okay, so what is really happening here? These are the kinds of questions that we as Americans, we as people need to start asking and thinking about. What is the point of some of this? Is it just health? Is it what can you trust, right? And so here you have leagues. There are independent schools, college football. They've also been starting to play. I watched a game. The Naval Academy played BYU. 55-3, no fans in the stands, okay? And Coach Niumatalolo of Navy says, yeah, we got our butts kicked. We were not ready to play. Why? He said, well, we had rules and policies in place. There was no contact in practice. So think about this. He's got Division I athletes that he's trying to prepare for a game that they couldn't have any physical contact. So they're running through drills, they're instructional, etc. Then they get to their first game. BYU's been playing and practicing for months, contact, and it looked like a Division I against a JV squad. No offense, I like both teams. I think Niumatalolo is a great coach. Love watching Navy. But he was not ready because they could not physical contact, right? And so you've got all these schools who are out playing. Some are having different policies. One of those leagues was the Big Ten. The Big Ten came out and said, no football season, right? Voted overwhelmingly, no football season, close it down. Players were upset, frustrated, schools, etc. Just this morning, the Big Ten, this is what's fascinating. I'm trying to figure out in 3 weeks what changed. Because truthfully, the numbers, even though I'm not sure I trust the reporting of the numbers, it's not like they've been, overwhelmingly better on the infection and the active cases. And yet it says, after postponing the 2020 football season on August 11th, so 3.5 weeks ago, the Big Ten announced Wednesday that there will be a Big Ten football season now. the Big Ten Council of Presidents and Chancellors voted unanimously to resume the football season starting this weekend, the weekend of October 23rd and 24th, 2020. And the schedule will be released sometime this week. So here's my thing. What's really behind this? What's driving this? Because truthfully, the numbers wouldn't support that they should now open that up according to the same numbers they used to shut it down. Yet here in Texas, we have numbers in schools that show they can open effectively, and you can find numbers on either side to fit your narrative. So what's driving it? See, this is the question to start asking. Is it because NFL games have been able to happen now effectively in some colleges and so forth? I don't know. Is it potentially money? Is there money driving this behind? Because football is such a big driver. At a certain point, that will happen, and maybe that is what's driving this. Right? So they voted unanimously to be able to open the season. Now, each team will play an 8-week schedule plus an added Week 9 game called Champions Week and so forth. But here's some of the things that they have to go through to test the protocol. Right? Athletes who test positive have to go through a point of contact daily testing and this whole chain reaction thing that has to go into place. And each institution will designate a chief infection officer who will oversee the collection and reporting of data for the Big Ten Conference. Team test positivity rate and population positivity rate thresholds will be used to determine recommendations for continuing. So if a percentage of the team, contract the virus, then they'll decide whether they shut it down. But here's the other thing. All COVID-19 positive student athletes will have to undergo comprehensive cardiac testing, including labs, biomarkers, ECG, echocardiogram, and a cardiac MRI. Following cardiac evaluation, student athletes must receive clearance from a cardiologist designated by the university for the primary purpose of cardiac clearance for COVID-19 positive athletes. Here's the point. The earliest an athlete can return to game competition is 21 days following a COVID-19 positive diagnosis. It doesn't even say if they test now negative and they've been clear of symptoms for 5 days or 7 days. No. The earliest is basically it's 21 days after the positive diagnosis. Lots of protocols in place, and I understand the point of that. So I've hopped from sports to gym owners to cases in Pennsylvania. My whole point of bringing this to your attention is to start to pay attention to what's happening. Sports, churches are starting to open in certain places. Churches are fighting back in many areas going, well, we're going to open anyway. Come arrest us. Come shut us down, sue us, whatever. They're opening because people are understanding that there are other conditions than just the physical health. Maybe it's mental health, spiritual health, financial health of a business that say all of these things can't be trumped by just this virus. And they're starting to push back, and you're seeing it across the country. Guys, this took me about 30 minutes, roughly, maybe an hour, to find all of this stuff. And we found lots more that we could bring you to demonstrate in our opinions of what is happening across the country in multiple states. And some of these states, like Pennsylvania, like the Big Ten states, like of Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, right? Some of those states, Ohio, where the lockdowns have been pretty severe, if you will, as opposed to other states, not as open as much. And they're starting to push back now. Things are starting to open. And I think you're starting to see that pendulum swing back. What does that mean for you as a business owner? What should you be paying attention to in your marketplace? You should constantly, right now, in my opinion, you should be looking for those opportunities and be in the lead generation mode, because as things start to open up, you can take advantage of that where maybe your competitors haven't. I know with Master Networks, where we meet right in person across the country, where we are a tribe of entrepreneurs that come together. Right now, in most cases, we've been in Zoom. In many cases, our regional partners, regional directors are going out and securing locations so that when they open up, they can move these chapters right in and get them the opportunity to have a location to meet. So we're taking advantage of those opportunities right now. There is no way in any shape or form that we are out of the woods on this virus. There is no way in any shape or form by any stretch that we have seen any part of the economic damage that the shutdowns will have for businesses and the economy. be prepared for that. There's 3 things that I think you can do. Number 1, you can step up your lead generation to massive levels right now. Growth solves issues. You should be in a growth mindset, a lead generation mindset, for sure. Number 2, you should put a reserve aside if at all possible. Be putting money aside. If you have some cash, get a reserve. Get at least a month or 2 of your operating expenses in reserve. And number 3, look at products or services that you could add to your stream to open up additional income sources that could add then, of course, to that saved revenue stream. Those 3 things are what we're teaching our team to do. It's what we're talking about here every single day. It's what we're focused on, and you should too as a entrepreneur. So thanks for being part of this episode. What say you? Where are you at on this? What are you seeing in your local marketplace? Are things opening up? Are they starting to come back? Or are the restrictions more? As I said here in Texas, Governor Abbott extended that mandate with no expiration date on it. And yet people are fighting back like crazy in different places and challenging numbers, etc. If you're listening to this and this was intriguing to you, join me every Monday, noon Central, on the Master Networks Facebook page where we talk about things that impact entrepreneurs. And I bring guests on other off weeks where we bring guests on and we interview them about their success stories and their challenges and how they've overcome those. But if you're an entrepreneur and you want to get with a tribe of like-minded, learning-based, service-oriented business owners and leaders who come together to support each other, then check us out at masternetworks.com and come be part of the tribe that is coming together to support local business. Until next time, I'll see you next Monday, noon Central, on the Master Networks Facebook page. Be well.
Welcome to Master Networks. So what is Master Networks? It's a membership network of learning-based, service-oriented entrepreneurs and business leaders. Members meet weekly in local chapters to connect with each other, share business referrals, and receive business training to help impact their business growth. Being a member also gives you access to our online university, where you can learn from many other business training resources. You will also have access to world-class training events, such as business development workshops and our annual conference, Connect, a 2-day event featuring keynote speakers, breakout sessions, networking, and more. Members also benefit from our national revenue share program called Affiliate Rewards, so you can earn $10 every month for every member you sponsor. To be a member, you pay just $49.95 a month, along with a one-time application fee, with no long-term contract. To learn more or register, please visit us online at masternetworks.com. Master Networks, for business leaders, connect, share, prosper.